Okay, so for the endocrine system,
Okay.
when we talk of the endocrine system, like we said yesterday, the endocrine system is made up of glands, which we call the endocrine glands. Is that okay? And organs. Endocrine glands is not only the endocrine glands that perform endocrine functions. We have other organs which have their primary roles, but some of them also produce hormones. And in endocrine system, we classify those organs to under the endocrine system. For example, the heart. The primary function of the heart is to pump blood, but the heart has an endocrine function by secreting some chemicals, which are considered endocrine hormones. Okay, and because of that, we classify them as, and that is why when you are explaining endocrine system, you just don't focus your explanation on only the endocrine glands. So we have major endocrine glands, and we have other organs in the body which are not necessarily endocrine glands. Their primary roles are not endocrine, but because they secrete hormones which are released into the blood before they go and act, we classify them under endocrine system. Okay, so basically the endocrine system is made up of glands and organs. Okay, that's why we use the word glands and organs. So we have major organs of the endocrine system, and we have other organs of the endocrine system. Okay, great. And I mentioned that if you take endocrine organs or endocrine glands, they are distributed throughout your body. Okay, so we have some endocrine organs in your head. We have some endocrine organs in your chest region. We have some endocrine organs in your pelvic region. So endocrine organs are distributed throughout your body. Okay, so they are scattered in terms of their anatomical location. Okay, and yesterday I gave you a clue, a principle for you to understand the endocrine system. And I told you the major principle in the endocrine system is that certain hormone have to be released. Usually that hormone has a target, but before the hormone gets to the target, it has to enter the blood. That's the principle with the endocrine system. Okay, that's what makes endocrine system. So it's like there is an organ producing a certain hormone. Before that hormone reach its target, it has to enter the blood before it gets there. So even if the organ producing the hormone works on the organ itself, the hormone have to enter the blood before it comes to the organ. Okay, so if we have any gland in the body or any organ in the body, and the organ, we classify it under endocrine. What it means is that that organ produces a certain hormone. That hormone has a target. Before the hormone gets to the target, it has to enter the blood. There's the principle in endocrine system. Okay, that is everything about endocrine system. Okay, so there is an organ. It produces a certain hormone. Before the hormone gets to the target, it has to enter the blood before. That's the main principle with endocrine system. Okay, and so endocrine system, we say one of the characteristics of endocrine organs is that they are ductless. Why are they ductless? Because their secretions go through the blood. Okay, and that's why we say the endocrine system is a ductless. Endocrine organs are ductless. Is that okay? Yes. So basically, that is it. Okay, and that's why they always say endocrine organs are ductless organs. Okay, and they are target specific. Target specific simply means that when an endocrine organ releases its hormone, the hormone will not affect all structures or organs in the body. It will only influence organs that have that have receptors for that hormone. Okay, other than that, there will be coas in the body. Imagine that all the hormones in your body, all cells and structures, it can influence them. There would be coas in the body. So every hormone has a target. Okay, it has another organ or tissue that have receptors for that hormone. So the hormone will be circulating through the blood. It will only work when it gets to the cell that has the receptors for that hormone. Okay, that is also one principle with endocrine organs. So they are target specific and they are highly vascularized. What that means is that endocrine organs, they have a lot of blood vessels around them. And the reason is because, endocrine organs, they release their hormones, their secretions into the bloodstream. So, of course, they should have a lot of blood vessels around them. Okay, that's why we say endocrine organs are highly vascularized. Okay, and I also mentioned that endocrine system, one of the characteristics is that this system is very slow, but long-lasting. This is a very slow system. If this system has to do something, very, very slow, but it lasts longer. Okay, very, very slow system as compared to the nervous system, but longer lasting. Okay, and this system uses chemical signaling. Endocrine system uses chemical signaling. Unlike nervous system, nervous system uses both electrical and chemical signaling. But endocrine system, the communication here, it is based on only chemical signaling. Okay, unlike nervous system. So for nervous system, it uses both electrical and chemical signaling. But endocrine system uses only chemical signaling. Is that okay? Great. For the functions of the endocrine system, it regulates growth and development. It plays a role in homeostasis. When it comes to your mood and emotions, the endocrine system plays a role. When it comes to reproductive activities or reproductive processes, the endocrine system plays a role. Your endocrine system also plays a role in your sleep-wake cycle. Okay, when it comes to stress response, to the endocrine system plays a role. When it comes to regulation of your blood pressure and your heart rate, the endocrine system plays a role. These are basically physiological things. Okay, and we are not interested in that so much in anatomy. So now we came down to the three types of signaling, and the type of signaling that we are interested in with endocrine system. So we have the autocrine signaling, we have the paracrine signaling, and we have the endocrine signaling. So when we say autocrine signaling, it's very simple. So a cell is producing a hormone. So you see, we have this cell. It is producing a certain hormone. That same cell has receptors for that hormone. That same cell, it has receptors for that hormone. But here, with the autocrine, you see, the hormone is not going to the blood. It's not entering the bloodstream. It is going to influence the cell directly. So it's like the same cell produces a hormone, and that same cell is a target for the hormone. So that same cell has receptors for the hormone. That is what we call autocrine signaling. Okay, good. Now, paracrine signaling. So cell A is producing a hormone. Cell A does not have receptors for that hormone, but it's another cell, or you can, in anatomy, you can say an adjacent cell that has receptors for that hormone. So you see, it's another cell that is having receptors for that hormone. Okay, but another key thing you need to talk about when you're explaining paracrine signaling is that the hormone will get to the other cell, but it will not pass through the blood. If you're explaining paracrine signaling, you don't add that, it's incomplete. So when we say paracrine signaling, a cell A is producing a hormone or a secretion. Now the hormone, the target for the hormone is on another cell. But before the hormone gets to the other cell, it does not enter the blood. That is what we call paracrine signaling. And then we have the almighty endocrine signaling, which we are interested in endocrine system. And once you understand this is the whole meaning of endocrine system. So there is a cell producing a certain hormone, but before the hormone gets to the target, even if the target is the same cell, it has to go to the blood and come for the blood to take it to the target. That is the entire meaning of endocrine system. That's the actual meaning of endocrine system. So endocrine system is like a certain hormone, a certain cell that produces a hormone. The hormone has a target in the body, but before the hormone reaches the target, it has to enter the blood before. So listen to the name of the system, endocrine. Endo means blood vessels. Okay, in anatomy, endo means blood vessels. So there is a cell, or there are organs that produces hormone. The hormone have their target organs or cells, but before the hormone reaches their target organs or cells, they have to go through the blood. okay, before they get there. That is endocrine system. Is that okay? So know the three types of signaling: the autocrine signaling, the paracrine signaling, and then the endocrine signaling. All right, that is fine. And we looked at some key terms. We look at hormones. Hormones are basically chemical messengers that are released into the blood that affect target cells and organs. Okay, we looked at negative feedback, positive feedback. I tried to explain what negative feedback means, what positive feedback means. And we also look at signaling. Okay, so we have autocrine signaling, paracrine signaling, and endocrine signaling. So I think we got to this slide. So when we come to the endocrine system, this is the summary of the entire endocrine system on a table or at a glance. So we are going to look at the major organs of the endocrine system and their functions. So these are the major organs of the endocrine system. Now, like I mentioned, we have other organs that play endocrine roles, but they are not necessarily endocrine organs. They are not major endocrine organs. So for example, if you take an organ like the skin, it has an endocrine role because it produces a certain hormone that is sent to the blood before it reaches the target. Is that okay? But it is not a major endocrine. The skin is not purposely for endocrine function. It has its own function. Okay. The liver, for example, also produces hormones, but it is not a major endocrine organ. The heart, the primary function of the heart is to pump blood. It's not an endocrine organ, but it produces certain hormones. And so we say it comes under other endocrine organs. Okay, so we have the placenta, we have the gastrointestinal tract or the GIT. Okay, so let's start with the major endocrine organs. So the major endocrine organs, we have the hypothalamus, we have the pituitary gland, we have the pineal gland, we have the thyroid gland, we have the parathyroid gland, we have the adrenal glands, we have the pancreas, we have the ovaries, we have the testes, and we have thymus in children. Okay, these are the major endocrine glands. Let's look at it on an image. So we have the hypothalamus. Which part of the brain can we find the hypothalamus? Yes, which part of the brain can we locate the hypothalamus?
The diencephalon.
Good, the diencephalon, excellent. Yes, excellent. It shows that you are learning. That is excellent. A diencephalon. So under the diencephalon, we have the thalamus, we have the hypothalamus, we have the pituitary gland, and we have the pineal gland. That's the diencephalon. Okay, so remember that the pineal gland, the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, even though they are part of the brain, but they are also organs, major organs in the endocrine system. Is that okay? Great. So that is something you have to know. So if you remember very well, when I was talking about the diencephalon, I told you that with the functions of the diencephalon, they play hormonal roles. So go back and check your slide that I mentioned that the diencephalon, one of the major functions of the diencephalon is for homeostasis, endocrine rules, and also regulation of sleep-wake cycle. Okay, because of the pineal gland. The pineal gland is part of the diencephalon. Okay, great. So these are the major organs of the endocrine system. So the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland is there, the pineal gland is there, the thyroid gland, the adrenal glands, the pancreas, the ovaries, okay? And then we have the testes. So the ovaries in females, the testes in males. Is that okay? So over here too, we have the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the pineal gland, the thyroid gland, the thymus. This thymus is responsible for immune function in children. After a certain age, it disappears. Is that okay? The thymus gland, we only have it in children. Is that okay? So it's a very interesting gland, but it's part of the major organs of the endocrine system. Okay, so but after a certain age, it disappears. Okay, good. So it's something you have. So if you are talking about the major endocrine glands, you have to you have to talk about it. Okay, so we only have it in children, but not long after birth, it disappears. Okay, so for children, its role is for immune function in children. Okay, and we will talk about it in detail. So the major endocrine glands, we have the hypothalamus, we have the pituitary gland, the pineal gland, the thyroid gland, the thymus, the pancreas, the adrenal glands, the kidneys, the testes, the ovaries. Okay, the kidney is not even a major endocrine gland. The kidney is not a major endocrine gland. So the major, we have the pituitary, the hypothalamus, the pineal gland, the thyroid gland, the thymus, the pancreas, the adrenal glands, the testes in males, the ovaries in females. Okay, so these are the major endocrine glands. Okay, great. So we have the hypothalamus. So if we ask you to list the major endocrine glands, you talk about the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the pineal gland, the thyroid gland, the parathyroid glands, the adrenal glands, the pancreas, which is an endocrine. The pancreas, the pancreas has exocrine function and endocrine. Okay, but when we talk of the pancreas in endocrine system, we are looking at the endocrine pancreas. Then we have the ovaries, the testes, and the thymus, which is only found in children and usually disappear after birth. Okay, and it plays immune functions. Okay, good. Let's quickly look at the other endocrine organs that are not really major endocrine organs. So those ones, we have the skin, we have the liver, we have the heart, the kidneys, adipose tissues, placenta, and gastrointestinal tract. Okay, good. These are other endocrine organs. So the heart is an other endocrine organs. It produces some hormones. The heart produces the ANP and BNP. ANP means atrial natriuretic peptide. BNP means brain natriuretic peptide. We will look at all that into detail. Okay, so these are the other endocrine organs. So the heart, the kidneys, the skin, the liver. Okay, they are other endocrine organs. The adipose tissues, the placenta, and gastrointestinal tract. So if we ask you to list other endocrine organs, then you talk about the skin. Or if we ask you what are other endocrine organs, it simply means they are organs that are not really major endocrine glands or organs, but because they produce certain hormones that are released into the blood before they get to their target, we classify them as endocrine glands. Okay, so in the body, if there is any organ in the body that releases secretions that obeys endocrine principle. What is endocrine principle? The endocrine principle is that there should be a cell releasing a hormone. Before that hormone or chemical gets to the target, it has to enter the bloodstream before. Any cell like that, whether it's a major or not a major endocrine gland, we classify it under the endocrine system. Why? Because it's obeying the endocrine principle. The endocrine principle says that a particular cell should release a hormone. That hormone has a target. Before it gets to the target, it has to go through the blood. Anything like that in the body, we classify as endocrine. Is that okay? Great. That's what we call. Okay, good. So let's go back to the endocrine.
That's a question.
Yeah, that's your question. Please ask your question. Go ahead and ask your question. We are trying to hear you. Can you adjust your question? I'm struggling to hear you. Okay, so I can go ahead. We help you out.
Hello,
okay,
sir.
I think she's not on the line. Okay, so with the endocrine organs, so we have the hypothalamus,
Hello.
the pituitary gland, the pineal gland, the thyroid gland, the parathyroid gland, the adrenal glands, the pancreas, the ovaries, the testes, and thymus in children. Okay. Now, the hypothalamus, where is it located? In the brain. Pituitary gland, where is it located? In the brain. Pineal gland too is also located deep in the brain. Thyroid gland, where is it located? The neck or in front of the trachea. So this is the thyroid gland. Okay, so these are anatomy things that we are doing. We are doing anatomy, so you should be interested in the location. And those are things that we can ask you. So hypothalamus is in the brain. Pituitary gland is also in the base of the brain or in the brain. Pineal gland is also deep inside the brain. Thyroid gland is at the neck area in front of the trachea. So here is the thyroid gland. It's at the neck region in front of what? The trachea. That's the thyroid gland. Okay, so if he asks you which endocrine gland is located at the neck region in front of the trachea, we are talking about the thyroid gland. Okay, then we have the parathyroid gland. Parathyroid gland is behind the thyroid. So if we ask you which which endocrine gland is located behind the thyroid gland, is the parathyroid gland. Okay, great. The adrenal glands are located above, on top of the kidney. So see, these are the adrenal glands, you see. So it means we have two adrenal glands. So one, each of them, that's why we say adrenal glands. Okay, and we have two kidneys, the left kidney, the right kidney. So we have the left adrenal gland, the right adrenal gland. Is that okay? So these are interesting anatomical things that you have to know. Okay, so we have the adrenal glands. They are located on top of the kidneys. Okay, then we have the pancreas. The pancreas is located behind the stomach. Okay, then we have the ovaries. The ovaries are within the pelvic cavity. The testis is also within the scrotum. Okay, and thymus is usually located. It's only found in children. It's usually located in the upper chest and also behind the sternum. Okay, so pay attention very well to the major endocrine organs and their locations. Those are things that you should expect for your MCQs. Okay, so the hypothalamus, where is it located? In the brain. Pituitary gland, where is it located? In the base of the brain. Pineal gland is also in the brain. Thyroid gland, where is it located? It's located at the neck region in front of your trachea. Parathyroid gland, where is it located? Behind the thyroid. Adrenal glands, where are they located? Adrenal glands are two. Each of them is located on top or above the kidney. Okay, then we have the pancreas. Where is it located? Behind the stomach. Ovaries, where are the ovaries located? Within the pelvic cavity. Testes in males, where are they located? In the scrotum. Then the thymus in children, where are they located? Usually in the upper chest, behind the sternum. So here, that's what we are talking about. So you see, we have the hypothalamus in the brain, pineal gland deep inside the brain, pituitary gland also deep inside the brain, thyroid gland at the neck region in front of the trachea, thymus, where is it located? In the upper chest. Okay, pancreas, where is it located? Behind the stomach. Adrenal glands, where are they located? Above the kidneys. Okay, then we have the testes. Where is it located? Within the scrotum. Ovaries, where are they located? In the pelvic cavity. These are anatomical things that you have to appreciate. Is that okay? Great. All right, that is fine. So let me give you a quiz. What are the major endocrine organs?
The
hypothalamus,
hypothalamus,
the pituitary gland,
Uh-huh.
pineal gland,
the pineal gland,
thyroid
the
gland,
thyroid gland,
thyroid gland, adrenal glands,
Okay.
pancreas,
and
ovaries,
pancreas,
testes,
ovaries,
and
and
thymus.
testes.
Good.
Thymus.
Excellent. Good. Excellent. Yes. So where can we locate the hypothalamus?
In the brain.
Where can we locate the thymus in children?
Upper chest behind
Chest,
sternum.
Good. Upper chest behind the sternum. Excellent. Excellent. Upper chest behind the sternum. Where can we locate the pancreas? The endocrine pancreas.
Behind the
and the
stomach.
stomach.
Good. Behind the stomach. Behind the stomach. Where can we locate the thyroid gland?
The neck in
In
front of
front
the
of the
trachea.
trachea.
Okay. Mention 3 endocrine organs located in the brain.
The hypothalamus,
Hypothalamus, the
the
pituitary gland,
pituitary
the
gland,
pineal
the
gland.
pineal gland.
That is excellent. Great. Great. So, yes, so those are some basic tips that you have to know on your fingertips. Okay, so in anatomy, what we can do is that we can give you a table. We write all the major endocrine organs. Then we will just ask you to write their locations. That's all. So I can just select 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is very good for exams question. I can just select 10 and line them up in a table. Then you just write their locations for 10 marks. Okay, so these are basic things you have to know of it. Okay, and they are very important anatomical features that you have to know. Because if you don't know anything about the organ, at least in anatomy, you have to know their locations. So hypothalamus, where is it located? Pituitary gland, where is it located? Pineal gland, where is it located? Thyroid gland, where is it located? Parathyroid glands, where are they located? Adrenal glands, where are they located? Pancreas, where are they located? Ovaries, where are they located? Okay, testes, where are they located? And thymus, where are they located? Okay, then you would now write all the locations at the areas where they are located. Is that okay? Now let's look at the other side of the table, the hormones that they produce. So if you take hypothalamus, the hypothalamus produce thyrotropin releasing hormone. Okay, corticotropin releasing hormone, growth hormone releasing hormone, gonadotropin releasing hormone, somatostatin, and dopamine. Okay, but we will look at all these organs into detail. Okay, we are going to take all of them one after the other and look at them into detail. Now, pituitary gland also produces the growth hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone, adrenocorticotropic hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, prolactin, antidiuretic hormone, and oxytocin. Pineal gland produces melatonin. This hormone is responsible for regulating your sleep-wake cycle. Okay, sometimes getting to the night, you feel like sleeping. In the morning, you wake up. There is a hormone regulating that too. That's the melatonin. Is that okay? That's why sometimes, no matter what, it gets to a certain point in the night, you feel like sleeping. There is a hormone responsible for that. And sometimes, even if you travel to a different place with different climates, and then night-day cycle, your body tends to adjust with time. And when it gets to 9 over there, you start to sleep at night. There is a hormone responsible for that. That is the melatonin. Okay, and we will look at all that into detail. Okay, the thyroid gland produces 3 hormones: the T3, T4, and calcitonin. T3, T4, and calcitonin. Okay, then we have the parathyroid hormone. They produce the parathyroid glands. They produce the parathyroid hormone. We have the adrenal gland. Adrenal gland produces cortisol, aldosterone, adrenaline, noradrenaline. The pancreas produces insulin, glucagon, somatostatin. The ovaries produces the estrogen and progesterone. The testes produces testosterone, and thymus produces thymosin. Okay, so the hypothalamus produces the thyrotropin releasing hormone. We have the corticotropin releasing hormone. We have gonadotropin releasing hormone, and we have growth hormone releasing hormone. We have somatostatin, and we have dopamine. Pituitary gland produces the growth hormone, the thyroid stimulating hormone. The TSH means thyroid stimulating hormone. The ACTH means adrenocorticotropic hormone. FSH means follicle stimulating hormone. LH means luteinizing hormone. PRL means prolactin. ADH, antidiuretic hormone, and then oxytocin. So the pituitary gland, but remember, we will look at the pituitary gland as a major gland on its own, because the pituitary gland too is having 2 divisions. We have the posterior pituitary gland and then the anterior pituitary gland. So you look at the pituitary gland as a whole gland on its own. Then the pineal gland also produces melatonin. The thyroid gland produces T3 and T4. It produces 3 different hormones, T3, T4, and calcitonin. The parathyroid gland produces the parathyroid hormone, PTH. Adrenal gland produces the cortisol, aldosterone, adrenaline, and noradrenaline. The pancreas produces insulin, glucagon, and somatostatin. The ovaries produces estrogen, progesterone. The testes produces testosterone, and the thymus gland produces thymosin. All right, so let's look at it over here. So these are the glands. So you see, the hypothalamus produces the thyrotropin releasing hormone, corticotropin releasing hormone, growth hormone releasing hormone. Then the dopamine. Then we have the somatostatin and vasopressin. The pineal gland produces the melatonin. Thyroid gland produces the T3, T4, and calcitonin. And the parathyroid gland produces the parathyroid hormone. Okay. Then we have the thymus gland produces thymopoietin or thymosin. The liver, no, we are only looking at the major. So the adrenal gland produces the cortisol, the aldosterone, the noradrenaline, and then the adrenaline itself. The pancreas produces insulin, glucagon, and somatostatin. The ovaries produces estrogen and progesterone. The testes produces testosterone. Okay. Yeah, so basically these are, the pituitary gland produces the growth hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, melanin stimulating hormone. We have the adrenocorticotropic hormone, luteinizing hormone. We have the prolactin, oxytocin, and vasopressin. Okay, good. So you should know the major endocrine organs and the hormones that they produce. So if you take the hypothalamus, it produces the thyrotropin releasing hormone, corticotropin releasing hormone, gonadotropin releasing hormone, growth hormone releasing hormone. Then we have the somatostatin and dopamine. Then if you take pituitary gland, the pituitary gland produces the growth hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone, adrenocorticotropic hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, prolactin, ADH, mean antidiuretic hormone, and oxytocin. Pineal gland produces what? Melatonin. Thyroid gland produces how many hormones? 3 hormones, T3, T4, and calcitonin. Parathyroid gland produces 1 hormone, the parathyroid hormone. Adrenal gland produces basically about 4 hormones, the cortisol, aldosterone, adrenaline, and noradrenaline. The pancreas produces insulin, glucagon, and somatostatin. The ovaries produces estrogen and progesterone. The testes produces testosterone. The thymus produces thymosin. Okay, so basically these are the major endocrine glands and their functions. Okay, great. What hormones? Yes, please. Yes, go ahead. Yes, go ahead. We are listening. Go ahead and ask your
Okay,
question,
I
please.
read something online. It said the oxytocin is produced by the hypothalamus, but then it's being released by the pituitary gland.
Oxytocin is produced by what?
By the hypothalamus, but
Okay.
it's released by the pituitary gland.
Yes, of course. Yes. So oxytocin is being produced by the hypothalamus. Yes, that is very more like we are going into detail, but here we are just looking at a summary of the hormones, the glands, and the hormones that are produced. When we start looking at hypothalamus into detail, we will talk about that. Yes, so the hypothalamus produces but when it comes to the release, it's being released by the posterior pituitary. Yes, you will do all those things. Don't worry. Don't take us forward, eh? Don't worry. Be patient with us. We will get to where you've read to.
Okay.
Yeah, so when it comes to, we will look at the hypothalamus into detail. Is that so? You see, it's here. So you see the hormones produced by the hypothalamus is in your slide. Yes. So don't worry, we will get there. Okay, but this table is just a summary. It's just a brief breakdown. We are going to take all the hormones one after the other, and we will look at them into detail. So don't worry. So when it comes to issues, when it comes to hypothalamus and pituitary, there are technical things about them. So we will get there. And when we get there, I will give you the details of. Yes. So for example, the oxytocin is being produced in the hypothalamus, but it's being released by the pituitary. There are some textbooks you look into the pituitary gland. They will put the oxytocin under the pituitary. It's just about you understanding the production and the release of that hormone. Okay, so the production of oxytocin is within the hypothalamus, but the release is within the pituitary. Even the pituitary specifically is the posterior pituitary. So when we get there, I'll explain all those things. All right, so basically, know the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus, these are the hormones that are produced and released by the hypothalamus. Okay, so here we have the pituitary gland. These are the hormones that are produced and released by the pituitary gland. We have the pineal gland. These are the hormones that are released by. So the melatonin is also produced by the pituitary gland. Thyroid gland, we have T3, T4, calcitonin. Parathyroid gland, we have the parathyroid hormone. Adrenal glands, we have these 4 hormones: cortisol, aldosterone, adrenaline, noradrenaline. Pancreas, insulin, glucagon, somatostatin. Even pancreas, there is more. When we get there, we will look at all that. When it comes to pancreas, there are more hormones beyond the 3 that we have over here. Okay, that's why this table is like a summary table that at a glance, at least it gives you some idea about the entire endocrine, the major endocrine organs. Okay, but there is more beyond what you are seeing in this table. The testes, we have the testosterone. The thymus produces the thymosin. Now let's go into the function. So for example, the hypothalamus, looking at all the hormones that they produce, they regulate your pituitary. Okay, so you see, the hormones that are produced by the hypothalamus, they will go and control, they will go and instruct the pituitary gland. Is that okay? So the hormones, so the hypothalamus is more like, I usually, in most textbooks, they have a name. The hypothalamus is more like a master regulator. Okay, and the pituitary gland is more like the master gland. Keep it in your mind. So when it comes to endocrine system, the hypothalamus, we call it the master regulator. It's like the boss. That is why the hypothalamus, see the hormones produced by the hypothalamus, they are like, we call them releasing hormones. When we say releasing hormone, it's a hormone that will go and instruct the pituitary gland to release its hormone. So in the endocrine system, the hypothalamus, we call it the master regulator, and the pituitary gland is the master gland. Okay, so the hypothalamus is the master regulator. The pituitary gland is the master gland. So when we ask you which gland is the master gland, it's the pituitary gland. Okay, but the hypothalamus is a master regulator. In some books, they don't even call it a gland, though. The hypothalamus, in some textbooks, they will tell you it's not a gland. It's a master regulator. Okay, but the pituitary gland itself is a gland. So even though it's in the brain, so that one is the master gland. So among all the glands, the reason why we call it a master gland is because the hormones produced by the pituitary gland, they control all the other endocrine glands. Okay, and then the hypothalamus, you see, so the hypothalamus, the hormones produced by the hypothalamus, they don't go and influence the other glands. So their target is the pituitary gland. So any hormone produced by the hypothalamus will go and instruct. Okay, it's like, let's take this organ. It's like in a class, we have, let's say, a lecturer, class rep, and then the students. So you see, in the class itself, you say the class rep is like the master gland there. Okay, then we have the other glands, which are the students. Then the lecturer would be considered or projected as maybe the master regulator. So if a lecturer wants to communicate, they will communicate to the rep. So if the hypothalamus wants to communicate, it can only communicate to the pituitary. So you see, all the hormones produced by the hypothalamus, they only instruct the pituitary gland. So the hypothalamus is a boss. That's the master regulator. That's the main organ, the major organ of the endocrine system. And so one trick is that the hormones produced by the hypothalamus, we call them the releasing hormones. The reason why we call them releasing hormones is that they will go and instruct the pituitary gland to release their hormones. So that's one trick. So anytime you see thyrotropin releasing hormone, once you see any word releasing hormone, it's the hypothalamus. It's the hypothalamus. Gonadotropin releasing hormone, hypothalamus. Growth hormone releasing hormone, hypothalamus. Corticotropin releasing hormone, hypothalamus. So most of the releasing hormones are produced by the hypothalamus. But there is an exception. We will come there. For example, prolactin releasing hormone is a releasing hormone, but that one is produced in the pituitary gland. You will come there. So that does not mean, because I'm saying all releasing hormones, hypothalamus, you keep that in your mind though. Majority, almost all of them. But there is one exception. So prolactin releasing hormone. Is that okay? That one is not produced by the good. So we will look at more details of. But remember, most of the releasing hormones, like thyrotropin releasing hormone, corticotropin releasing hormone, gonadotropin releasing hormone. You see, all these are releasing hormone. Growth hormone releasing inhibiting hormone. That hormone is also produced by the hypothalamus. So these are some key tips. But when you see a hormone, growth hormone, pituitary gland, thyroid stimulating hormone, all the stimulating hormones too are produced by the pituitary. Okay, adrenocorticotropic hormone, pituitary gland, follicle stimulating hormone, pituitary gland, luteinizing hormone, pituitary gland, antidiuretic hormone, pituitary gland. Once you hear any hormone, especially the stimulating hormones, pituitary gland. Okay, so those are some simple tips that you have to know. Okay, so now let's come to the other endocrine glands. So the other endocrine glands, like the skin is within the outer body layers. The liver is in the upper right abdomen. Okay, we've looked at the locations already. So the skin produces this hormone. Okay, cholecalciferol. This is a vitamin D precursor. And this is the hormone that initiates the synthesis of vitamin D. The liver also produces the angiotensinogen. You remember angiotensinogen in the RAS, the angiotensinogen in the RAS system. Okay, good. And this angiotensinogen helps with the regulation of your blood pressure. Okay, BP regulation. Okay, and then we have the insulin-like growth factor 1, IGF, insulin-like growth factor 1. That is also plays a role in growth. Okay, then we have the thrombopoietin. This is responsible for platelet formation. All these hormones are produced by the liver. We have the heart. The heart produces the AMP and BMP. AMP is the atrial natriuretic peptide. BMP is the brain natriuretic peptide. And these hormones are responsible for regulating your blood pressure and also controlling sodium and water excretion. Okay, we have the kidneys. The kidney produces what? Erythropoietin. And these hormones stimulate the production of what? Red blood cell. Remember, we've looked at erythropoietin already. Okay, you should remember the cell that produces erythropoietin. And the kidney also produces renin and what we call calcitrol. Okay, so erythropoietin helps with the production of red blood cell. Renin helps with the regulation of BP. Calcitrol plays a role in calcium balance. Adipose tissues also produce leptin, and leptin regulates hunger and your energy balance. We have the placenta. Placenta produces human chorionic gonadotropin, estrogen, and progesterone. Okay, and placenta, the hormones produced by the placenta is what maintains pregnancy and the activities of the uterus during pregnancy. The gastrointestinal tract also produces the gastrin, secretin, cholecystokinin, that's the CCK, and several other hormones. We will look at all that into detail. Okay, good. So let's go over this again. So the skin produces cholecalciferol. Okay, good. What does it do? It helps with the synthesis of vitamin D. The liver also produces the insulin-like growth factor 1. which is it also produces the angiotensinogen, which is responsible for blood pressure regulation, thrombopoietin, which is responsible for platelet formation. The heart also produces the ANP and BNP. These two hormones, the ANP help to lower your blood pressure by promoting sodium and water excretion. Okay, then we have the kidneys. The kidneys also produces erythropoietin, the EPO, erythropoietin, the renin, and calcitrol. So erythropoietin help with the production of red blood cells. Renin helps to regulate your BP. Calcitrol helps to regulate your calcium level. We have the adipose tissues. They produce leptin. Leptin regulates your hunger and energy balance. Placenta produces 3 hormones: HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin, estrogen, and progesterone. Gastrointestinal tract produces the gastrin, secretin, cholecystokinin, and several other hormones that we will look at into detail. Okay, so basically, from this diagram, at least this diagram will help you at a glance to appreciate the various hormones. And we can pick inspiration from this table to set MCQ questions. Okay, so you have to study this table very well. So the skin, you should know at least the skin, this table will tell you the skin produces this hormone. Okay, and then the function of that hormone. So the liver also produces, so the hormones produced by the liver, we have the insulin-like growth factor 1. So if we ask you which endocrine organ produces the IGF, you know it's the liver. Okay, which organ produces the atrial natriuretic peptide, you know is the heart. Okay, the kidneys, they produce the erythropoietin, renin, and calcitrol. Okay, good. Placenta produces what hormones? The human chorionic gonadotropin, estrogen, and progesterone. The gastrointestinal tract produces what? Gastrin, secretin, cholecystokinin, and several other hormones. Okay, yeah. So basically, you have to have an idea of the various other endocrine organs and the hormones that they produce and their functions. So now that at least you know the major and the other endocrine organs, at least we can proceed and now start to look at some specific endocrine organs. Okay, so at least you can also look at the differences between the nervous system and the endocrine system. One of the simple differences is that, you know, nervous system, it makes use of both electrical impulse and neurotransmitters, but the endocrine system makes use of hormones. And that means that endocrine system involves electrical and chemical signaling. Sorry, endocrine system involves only chemical signaling. Nervous system involves electrical and chemical signaling. Is that okay? Great. Now, nervous system is localized and specific, but usually endocrine system is often general and widespread throughout the body. You know, nervous system is very localized and very specific. Again, nervous system is very fast. Transmission, signal transmission or communication in the nervous system is very, very fast. Okay? Endocrine system is very slow acting, but long lasting. Okay, so you see, endocrine system, the activities are long lasting. Okay, but nervous system activities are very short lived. It stops quickly. When the moment the stimulus ends, the nervous activity have ended. But endocrine system is long acting. Okay, now nervous system, there is rapid adaptation, but when it comes to adaptation in endocrine system, it's very, very slow. So that's why when we are looking at the characteristics of neurons or nervous system, we have adaptability, neuroplasticity, and adaptability. So nervous system, it adapts rapidly, but endocrine system takes time to adapt. Okay, but when it adapts, the effect is it lasts very longer. Okay, great. So basically, these are some differences. You can pay attention to this table as well. Okay, that's fine. So now we can start with the hypothalamus. So now we are going to take the major endocrine organs one after the other. So we will look at the hypothalamus, we will look at the pituitary gland, we will look at the pancreas, we will look at the thyroid gland, we will look at the parathyroid gland, okay, we will look at the adrenal gland. So we are going to look at the various endocrine organs, the major endocrine organs, one after the other. Okay, so let's start with the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus. What is another name for the hypothalamus? The master regulator. The master regulator. In some books, they call it the head ganglion. Okay, so another name for the hypothalamus is the master regulator. So in some textbooks too, they will call it the head ganglion. So the hypothalamus is not the master gland though. The master gland is the pituitary gland. The hypothalamus is the boss himself. So we call it the master regulator. The master regulator. And remember that the hormones produced by the hypothalamus, they go and influence the pituitary gland. They do not go and influence other glands directly. Okay, they go and influence the pituitary gland. Okay, great. So that's the hypothalamus. Now, what's the size and location of the hypothalamus? The hypothalamus is very small. It's almond-sized in terms of its structure, and it's located behind the brain. Okay, good. The hypothalamus accounts for less than 1% of the brain mass. That is also something interesting you can consider in terms of anatomy. It accounts for just 1% of the total brain mass. Now, so, and that tells you that, you see, this emphasis is to tell you that it's very small. It's like some small boy be somewhere who is controlling a lot of things. Okay, so the hypothalamus, this is just to let you know that this is a very small gland. Okay, but it's doing a lot of mighty things. It's doing a lot of things. Okay, so it's not about the size. So if you are looking at the hypothalamus and the thyroid gland is very big. Later on, I'll let you know the gland that is the largest, is the biggest in size. Okay, this gland is very small, but it does a lot of things. That's the hypothalamus. Okay, so it accounts for 1% of the total brain mass. Despite its small size, or despite its size, the hypothalamus plays a crucial role in regulating vital body functions. So in fact, the hypothalamus is more like the activities it does. It controls any other gland in there, but just that it doesn't control them directly. So it's like the hypothalamus will go and control the pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland also go and command the other glands. That's why we call it the master regulator. Okay, then the pituitary gland is the master gland. Okay, great. Now, in terms of hormonal control center, it sends signals that's releasing and inhibiting hormones. So like I told you earlier on, the hypothalamus produces two types of hormones, the inhibiting hormones and the releasing hormones. So most of the time, when you hear of inhibiting hormones, one trick you can know whether a certain hormone is produced by the hypothalamus is the hormone is a releasing hormone or inhibiting hormone. Once you hear something releasing hormone, inhibiting hormone, is coming from the hypothalamus. Okay, good. But there is one exception that I will show you later on. So let's look at, this is how the hypothalamus looks like. So take your time and look at this diagram very well. This is how the hypothalamus looks like. So here is it. So here is the hypothalamus. Here is the hypothalamus. So over here too, here is the hypothalamus. Here is the hypothalamus. So you see, we have the hypothalamus, and this is the thalamus. And all these are part of, and this is the pons. So you see the hypothalamus. So it's like we are in the brain. So you see here, we've cut a cross section of the diencephalon, and we've projected it like this. It's like we've zoomed it like this, and we are looking. So this is how the hypothalamus looks like. This, the green part, that's the hypothalamus. Is that okay? That's what we call the hypothalamus. So under the hypothalamus, we have the pituitary. So you see, we have the pituitary too is divided into two. We have the anterior pituitary, and then we have the posterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary, and we have the posterior pituitary. Okay, good. So this is what we call the hypothalamus. If you come to this diagram, This is what we call the hypothalamus. Let me check whether I have another. Good. So this is also a diagram of the. So this is also the hypothalamus. Okay, yes. So look at it very well. So this is how the hypothalamus look like. And there are a lot of interesting anatomical things about the hypothalamus. There are a lot of interesting things about the hypothalamus, which I will show you later on as we move on.
So this I have a question.
Yes, ask your question, please.
That is from the look of the diagram, doesn't mean the hypothalamus have some portion in the brainstem?
Oh, amplify! Can you please amplify your voice? We can hardly hear you.
That is from the diagram.
Uh-huh.
It looks like some portion of the hypothalamus is found in the brainstem.
It's found in the brainstem. No? The hypothalamus, but of course, have you forgotten? Were you part of our discussion yesterday? Have you forgotten the brainstem? The hypothalamus is part of the brainstem. The diencephalon is also part of the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is part of the diencephalon. And you remember I told you that the part of the brainstem, we have the diencephalon, the pons, we have the midbrain, and then we have the medulla oblongata. I think you were not part of yesterday's lectures. Yeah, so the hypothalamus is within the brain. It's part of the brainstem. So the brainstem, we have 4 parts: the diencephalon, the midbrain, the pons, the medulla oblongata. And the hypothalamus is part of the diencephalon. So the diencephalon, we have the thalamus, the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the pineal gland. So from nervous system, I think your question has already been answered in the nervous system. Okay, great. So you see that what I wanted you to pay attention to is that you can see the hypothalamus is connected to the pituitary gland. Okay, so this is the hypothalamus. So over here, this is it. This is the hypothalamus. So over here to this is the hypothalamus. Now, you know, the hypothalamus is connected to the pituitary gland. It connects to the pituitary gland in 2 ways. Listen carefully. The hypothalamus connects to the pituitary gland in 2 ways. It connects to it, 1, by blood vessels, and 2, it also connects to it by nerves. Let's look at this diagram. So you see this diagram. You see here, this is the posterior pituitary. So you see this is the posterior pituitary. And this one is the anterior pituitary. So look at it very well. And this is a very interesting anatomical feature in the hypothalamus that you have to know. So you see this is the anterior pituitary. The top part, this one here, this one, the part that I'm going over, this is the hypothalamus. But you see, the hypothalamus connects to the pituitary gland in 2 ways. It connects to the pituitary gland in 2 ways. It connects to it, 1, by nerves, and 2, by blood vessels. Okay, and if you understand this will help you to appreciate the 2 parts of the the pituitary gland. And so the pituitary gland, you see the posterior pituitary, we call it neurohypophysis. Neurohypophysis. You see the word neuro. That means that it is connected to the hypothalamus by nerves or neurons. So you see we have neurons. So all these neurons are connecting to the posterior pituitary. So the posterior pituitary, another name for posterior pituitary is the neurohypophysis. So if you go and read the textbook and they write neurohypophysis, why? Because that part, the posterior pituitary, is connected to the hypothalamus by nerves. And the anterior pituitary, another name for the anterior pituitary, we call it adenohypophysis. Or some books will call it adrenohypophysis. What that means is that it is connected to the hypothalamus by blood vessels. Okay, in anatomy, when we say adeno, that one too means related to blood vessels. When we say something is adeno, it means something that is related to blood vessels. Okay, so the hypothalamus is connected to the pituitary gland, but the pituitary gland is made up of two parts. Now, the posterior pituitary connects to the hypothalamus by nerves, and then the anterior pituitary connects to the hypothalamus by blood vessels. Because of that, the anterior pituitary, we call it adenohypophysis. Say adenohypophysis. Say it after. Say adenohypophysis.
Adeno.
Good. Good. The reason why we call it adenohypophysis is that the anterior pituitary, they are connected, okay, to the hypothalamus by nerves. Okay. But the posterior pituitary, they are connected by blood vessels. But the posterior pituitary, they are connected to the hypothalamus by nerves. Is that okay? So keep it in your mind. And that's why the posterior pituitary, in some books, you see they will call it the neurohypophysis. That simply means that the neuro is to tell you that they are connected to the hypothalamus by nerves. Okay, so and it's a very interesting anatomical feature that you have to know. So here, there's the hypothalamus that we are talking about. There's the hypothalamus. Over here too, this is the hypothalamus. So you see, it comes to connect to, so this is the posterior pituitary, or you can call it neurohypophysis. This is the anterior pituitary. You can call it adenohypophysis. Okay, so let's come and look at this diagram again. So here, so this diagram is not the hypothalamus. So this is the hypothalamus. But because it is related to the pituitary gland, most textbooks you are going to see them also highlighting or elaborating on the parts of the pituitary gland because the two glands are related. Okay, great. So if you look at the the pituitary gland, here is the posterior pituitary, and this part is the anterior pituitary. Okay, so the anterior pituitary, we see we have the top part here. We call this part the pars tubularis. The pars tubularis. The middle part, this part, we call it the pars intermedia, and then the downmost part, we call it the pars distalis. Then the line that is dividing the anterior pituitary from the posterior pituitary, we call it the infundibular stalk. So here, okay, so here we have the infundibular stalk. Then here we have the pars nervosa. Okay, so we have the infundibular stalk and we have the pars nervosa. Okay, great. So let's look at it again from this diagram. So here, this is the posterior pituitary, and this one is the anterior pituitary. So the anterior pituitary is also called the adenohypophysis. The posterior pituitary is also called the neurohypophysis. Okay, so let's look at, I think I have a better diagram over here. So if you look at this diagram, so you see this is the anterior pituitary. Say this diagram is labeling it adenohypophysis. It's the same as anterior pituitary. So when you see adenohypophysis, that's anterior pituitary. When you see neurohypophysis, that is posterior pituitary. Why neurohypophysis? Because the posterior pituitary is connected to the hypothalamus by what? By nerves. Why adenohypophysis? Because the anterior pituitary is connected to the hypothalamus by what? Blood vessels. Is that okay? Then you see we have the stalk, the infundibular stalk. It's like the neck region of the pituitary gland. It's like the hanging part of the pituitary gland, the neck region that is hanged. That is what we call the infundibular stalk. Okay, great. Then we have the posterior lobe. Okay, so we have the anterior lobe. We have the pars tubularis. Okay, so this part, the middle part, as if the part that is hanging, that's what we call the infundibulum, or you can call it the infundibular stalk. Okay, then this is the pituitary gland, which we have the anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary. Then the hypothalamus is at the top. Okay, so like I said, the posterior pituitary is connected to the hypothalamus by nerves. Because of that, we call it what? The neurohypophysis. Anterior pituitary is connected by blood vessels. Because of that, we call it what? Adenohypophysis. Okay, good. So at least understand the anatomical features. So these are deep anatomy things that you have to know. Okay, so the part that is hanging, so this portion, the infundibular stalk. Okay, this part is what we call the infundibulum, and the region that is sort of dividing the anterior from the posterior, infundibular stalk. So this part, so you see the line of demarcation here, but the part that is hanging is the infundibulum. This region, you see the region that I'm circling, this region that is joining the region that is joining the hypothalamus. This region is what we call the infundibulum, and the region that is dividing the anterior from the posterior, the infundibular stalk. Okay, then the posterior pituitary. So the posterior pituitary, we have the pars nervosa. Okay, so the downmost part or the body of the posterior pituitary is what we call the pars nervosa. Then when it comes to the anterior pituitary too, we have the pars tubularis. The pars tubularis is the region that is connected to the infundibulum. The pars intermedia, that is the medial part or the main body of the anterior pituitary. And then the downmost part of the anterior pituitary, we call it the pars distalis. Okay, so let me go over it again. So we have the hypothalamus over here. The hypothalamus is here. And I told you the hypothalamus joins what? The pituitary gland. It joins this in two ways. It joins the pituitary gland is in two parts, the anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary. Okay, so the hypothalamus joins the anterior pituitary using what? Blood vessels. And because of that, the anterior pituitary, you can also call it the adenohypophysis. And then the hypothalamus also joined the posterior pituitary using nerves. And because of that, the posterior pituitary, you can also call it the neurohypophysis. And I said that the parts of the pituitary gland that joins the hypothalamus, this portion, we call it the infundibulum. Infundibulum. Okay. And then when it comes to the part of the anterior pituitary is also in three parts. We have the part that joins the infundibulum. That's the topmost part. That's the pars tubularis. And the middle part or the main body of the anterior pituitary, that's the pars intermedia. Okay. And at that area, we have a lot of blood vessels over. Then we have the pars distalis. That's the downmost part of the anterior pituitary. Now, when it comes to the posterior pituitary, we have the pars nervosa, which is more like the downmost part or the main body of the posterior pituitary. Okay, then we have the infundibular stalk. That is more like the demarcated area that is giving us the boundary between the anterior pituitary and then the posterior pituitary. Okay, so this is a diagram. Yes, please.
Please, I can't see your screen.
Oh, I think you should go off and rejoin again. Usually when it happens, that it's your network. Oh, how many of you are having that problem? The others, can you see the screen?
No.
Yes, they should go off and then join again.
The others, can you see the screen?
Yes.
So, okay, that is fine. So once your screen goes off, it means you should just adjust the network. So come. So yes, so now at least you've seen the hypothalamus, where it's located. So this is the hypothalamus. Okay, that's the green part. That's the hypothalamus. But it's related to the pituitary gland. So a lot of diagrams in textbook, you are going to see a diagram of the hypothalamus and the pituitary together, just as I've presented over here. Okay, great. So you just have to appreciate that this is the part that is referred to as the hypothalamus. Okay, and it's connected to the pituitary gland. Okay, all right, that is fine. That is fine. And so here, so this will let you appreciate. So it has two hormone transport systems. So it has the hypophyseal portal system. Okay, and it has the hypothalamo hypophyseal tract. So say it after me. Say hypophyseal portal system. Say hypophyseal portal system.
Hypophyseal
Portal system.
And then hypothalamo hypophyseal tract.
Hypothalamo hypophyseal tract.
Hypothalamo hypophyseal tract.
hypophysial tract.
Facial portal system. You see, I told you that the hypothalamus communicates to the pituitary gland, right? How does the hypothalamus communicate to the anterior pituitary? How does the hypothalamus communicate to the anterior pituitary?
Through the blood vessels.
Through the blood vessels.
Through what?
Blood vessels.
Good. That is what we call the hypophyseal portal system. So when we say hypophyseal portal system, we are trying to tell you that the hypothalamus, it communicates in two ways. The hypothalamus, it communicates in two ways. It communicates to the pituitary gland, one, through the blood, and two, through nerves. So it communicates with the anterior pituitary through blood vessels, and it communicates to the posterior pituitary through nerves. That one is what we call the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract. So when we say hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract, it's just to tell you that the hypothalamus communicates to the posterior pituitary using nerve fibers or using nerves. And when we say the hypophyseal portal system, portal means blood or a vessel in the body. In anatomy, when we say a portal, we are looking at a tract or a vessel. We are looking at a vessel. Okay, so the hypophyseal portal system is talking about how the hypothalamus communicates with what? Communicates with the anterior pituitary. And the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract is about the nervous communication. Okay, so the hypothalamus communicates through two ways. The first one is the hypophyseal portal system. What does that mean? It means the hypothalamus communicates with the anterior pituitary with the help of blood vessels. And then we have the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract. What does that mean? That one simply means that the hypothalamus communicates to the posterior pituitary with the help of nerve fibers. Is that okay? You don't have to go and sit down and memorize these things, so your head will ache. It's just about understanding it. So when we say hypophyseal portal system, it means the hypothalamus communicates into the hypothalamus only communicates to the pituitary gland. Keep it in your mind. The hypothalamus, it has no deal communicating to any other gland. It only communicates directly to only the pituitary. Okay, and it does that in two ways or two systems. The first one is the hypophyseal portal system. What does that mean? It simply means the hypothalamus communicates with the anterior pituitary using blood vessels. Then the second one is the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract. What does that mean? It simply means the hypothalamus communicates to the posterior pituitary using nerve fibers. Is that okay? That's the meaning. Okay. All right. What are the two transport systems of the hypothalamus? Yes, what are the two transport systems of the hypothalamus?
The hypophyseal portal system and then hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract. Sorry.
Okay, so what's the meaning of hypophyseal portal system?
It means that it transfers through blood vessel, anterior pituitary glands.
What does it mean?
It means that it transfers through the anterior pituitary gland through a blood vessel.
It means that what?
It means that it transfers through.
No, it means that it communicates.
It communicates. Sorry, it means that it communicates through the anterior pituitary by blood vessel.
Good, with the help of blood vessels. It means that it communicates with it connects with the anterior pituitary with the aid of what? Blood vessels. How about the hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal system tract? Hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract. What does it mean?
That one too means it connects to the posterior pituitary gland through the nerve fibers.
Through nerve fibers. Excellent. Great. That is excellent. And these are anatomical things. So these are purely anatomy. This one is not physiology. So when we say so, if you're explaining, the hypothalamus is the master regulator. The hypothalamus has no business directly with any other gland. It only communicates directly with the pituitary gland, and because of that, anatomically, it is connected to the pituitary gland. It connects to the pituitary gland in two ways, and you know the pituitary gland is in two parts: the anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary. Okay, so it connects to the anterior pituitary with the help of what? Blood vessels, and because of that, the anterior pituitary, another name is called the adenohypophysis. And it also connects to the posterior pituitary with the help of nerve fibers. And because of that, the posterior pituitary, we call it neurohypophysis. That's another name. So the reason why we call it neurohypophysis is because it is connected to the hypothalamus with the help of what? Nerve fibers. And so when we ask you the two transport systems of the hypothalamus, is the hypophyseal portal system. That is the help of blood vessels. That's via blood vessels. And then the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract, that is the nerve fibers. Is that okay? The nerve fibers. Okay, so keep it in your mind. Keep it very well in your mind. Now, let's look at the hormones that are produced by the hypothalamus. So we have releasing hormones. The hypothalamus produces releasing hormones, inhibiting hormones, and then the posterior hormones. So this is where the young lady that has read a bit ahead, this is where your question will be answered. That's why I told you to calm down. So the hypothalamus produces releasing hormones, inhibiting hormones, and the hypothalamus also produces all the hormones that are inside the posterior pituitary. Okay, let me go over that again. The hypothalamus produces 3 types of hormones. Oh, who is playing the organ?
Sir, please, you can't see the screen.
So the hypothalamus produces 3 different types of hormones.
Sir, please, we can't see the screen.
Oh, madam, say you personalize it. I think others can see you.
It will go off and come back.
We can't see.
Oh, so it means all of you cannot see.
We can see.
Oh,
some of us can see.
We can see.
So once
So
one
they should
person
leave
can
and
see, it means that the others check your network. Sometimes it's the network. Who is the organist?
Amen.
Okay, that is fine. So the hypothalamus produces 3 different types of hormones. So releasing hormones, inhibiting hormones, and then all the hormones in the posterior pituitary gland are also produced inside the hypothalamus, just that they are stored there. So let me take you back to the diagram. So you see the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland also, the anterior pituitary, it produces its own hormones. But when it comes to the posterior pituitary, okay, the hormones here, they are actually produced in the hypothalamus, but they are stored. So it's like a storage gland, the posterior pituitary. So there are 2 hormones over here, the antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. These 2 hormones here, they are actually produced in the hypothalamus, but they are stored over here. Keep it in your mind. So this gland is like a releasing gland. It does not produce. It's like it stores and releases. So the posterior pituitary is more like it only stores hormone and releases it when it is needed. So the hormones in the posterior pituitary, they are actually produced in the hypothalamus. Then through the nerve fibers, they are moved into the posterior pituitary to be stored there. Okay, so the posterior pituitary does not produce. It actually stores and releases. So it releases the antidiuretic hormone and the oxytocin. These 2 hormones are actually coming from the hypothalamus, but they will be stored over here. But the anterior pituitary, all the hormones in the anterior pituitary are actually produced there. Okay, so let me go over that again. The hypothalamus, it produces the releasing hormones, inhibiting hormones, and all the hormones in the posterior pituitary. So we call it the posterior pituitary hormones. Okay, so all the posterior pituitary hormones are also produced by the hypothalamus. Okay, so the hypothalamus produces the hormones. There are 2 hormones here, ADH and oxytocin. They are all produced over here. So if we ask you hormones produced by the hypothalamus, you have to talk about the ADH and oxytocin too. Okay, so there are some books that you're going to look through. They will tell you the ADH and oxytocin are part of the posterior pituitary. It's not a problem, but you have to understand deeper that those hormones, even though they are under posterior pituitary, They are not produced here. They are produced in the hypothalamus. So let's go back. So the releasing hormones, what are the releasing hormones? The thyrotropin releasing hormone, corticotropin releasing hormone. Let's look at it over. So we have the thyrotropin releasing hormone. So say it after me. Say thyrotropin releasing hormone. Corticotropin releasing hormone.
Corticotropin releasing hormone.
Gonadotropin releasing hormone.
Gonadotropin releasing hormone.
Growth hormone releasing hormone.
Growth hormone releasing hormone.
Prolactin inhibiting hormone.
Prolactin inhibiting hormone.
Stimulating hormone inhibiting hormone.
Melanocytes stimulating
Inhibiting.
DH and oxytocin. Say antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin.
Antidiuretic
hormone and oxytocin.
Thyrotropin releasing hormone.
Thyrotropin releasing hormone.
Releasing hormone.
Corticotropin releasing hormone.
Why is it that when they get here now, you people amplify your voice? The other ones, you be talking slow. Why? Gonadotropin releasing hormone.
Gonadotropin releasing hormone.
Growth hormone releasing hormone.
Growth hormone
releasing
hormone.
Hormone.
Growth hormone inhibiting hormone.
Beating hormone.
Prolactin inhibiting hormone.
Relating inhibiting hormone.
Stimulating inhibiting hormone.
Antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. Antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin.
Antidiuretic
hormone and oxytocin.
All the hormones produced by the hypothalamus. So anytime we ask, one trick is that anytime you see any hormone, releasing hormone, any hormone with the word releasing, inhibiting, straight, it's a hypothalamic. It's produced by the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus hormone, they produce any hormone that is having the word releasing, inhibiting, is the hypothalamus. That's the trick you should keep in your mind. Okay, so when you see thyrotropin releasing, once you see releasing, then you remember, oh, all the releasing hormones are from the hypothalamus. Once you see the word corticotropin releasing hormone, once you see the word inhibiting hormone, then you remember all inhibiting hormones are from the hypothalamus. That is one trick. So when you see prolactin inhibiting hormone, you should know that once it's an inhibiting hormone, it's from the hypothalamus. Okay. Usually the stimulating hormones are from the pituitary gland, but there is an exception because you see here, it's not just melanocyte stimulating, it's melanocyte stimulating inhibiting hormone. But when you see stimulating alone, usually stimulating hormones are produced by the pituitary gland. Okay, so thyrotropin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus, corticotropin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus, gonadotropin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus. Okay, growth hormone releasing hormone from the hypothalamus, growth hormone inhibiting hormone from the hypothalamus. Okay, prolactin inhibiting hormone from the hypothalamus. Okay, then we have the melanocyte stimulating inhibiting hormone also from the hypothalamus. Okay, very, very interesting things. Okay, yes, so very, very interesting things. So pay attention to some of these things. Then the posterior pituitary hormones, the antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin, also from the hypothalamus. Okay, good. So if we ask you hormones produced by the hypothalamus, the thyrotropin releasing hormone, TRH, corticotropin releasing hormone, gonadotropin releasing hormone, growth hormone releasing hormone, growth hormone inhibiting hormone. That is what we also call the growth hormone inhibiting hormone. Is what we also call the somatostatin. It's the same hormone. Okay, the somatostatin. Then we have the prolactin inhibiting hormone. We have, it also produces the dopamine. Then we have the melanocyte stimulating hormone inhibiting hormone. We have the antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. So these are the hormones that are produced by the hypothalamus. You remember I told you that all the hormones produced by the hypothalamus, they go straight to target the pituitary gland. So the hypothalamus only communicates. So that means that, remember, we learned from the principles of endocrine system that every hormone has a target. So the question I was expecting from you is that, okay, say, when the hypothalamus produces the thyrotropin releasing hormone, will it go and target the entire pituitary gland? No. There are different cells on the pituitary gland. So you see, when the hypothalamus produces the thyrotropin releasing hormone, there is a particular cell on the pituitary gland. We call it the thyrotroph cells. So the thyrotropin releasing hormone only targets the thyrotroph cells. And when it targets the thyrotroph cells in the pituitary gland, it will stimulate the thyrotroph cells to produce what we call the thyroid stimulating hormone. Now, the corticotropin releasing hormone, when it is produced by the hypothalamus, it goes straight to the pituitary gland. There is a special cell on the pituitary gland. We call it the corticotroph cells. So it will go and target the corticotroph cells so that the corticotroph cells will produce adrenocorticotropic hormone. Okay. Now, the gonadotropin releasing hormone, when it is produced by the hypothalamus, it also goes to the pituitary, but it will not target all the pituitary. It will only target the gonadotroph cells in the pituitary gland. When it targets the gonadotroph cells, it will stimulate these cells to produce follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Now, the gonadotropin releasing hormone is also produced by the hypothalamus. Now, when it is being released, it goes straight to the pituitary gland, but it will only target the somatotroph cells. When it stimulates the somatotroph cells, it will let it produce what we call growth hormone. Then we go to the growth hormone inhibiting hormone. Now, this hormone will also go to the pituitary. It will also target the same somatotroph cells, but this time, it will not let it produce growth hormone. It will rather inhibit the secretion of growth hormones. Then we have prolactin inhibiting hormone. When it is being produced, it goes straight to the pituitary. It will target a cell we call the latotroph cells on the pituitary. Then it will force these cells to produce what? To inhibit prolactin secretion. Then we have the melanocyte stimulating inhibiting hormone. This hormone will also go to the pituitary. There is a special cell on the pituitary. We call it the melanotroph cells. When it targets this cell, it will stimulate this cell to inhibit the production of melanocyte stimulating hormones. Then we have the antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. Remember, these antidiuretic hormones, even though they are produced by the hypothalamus, they are not released from the hypothalamus. They are produced by the hypothalamus and sent to the posterior pituitary to be stored there. So they are rather released from the posterior pituitary. They are not made in the posterior pituitary. They are rather released from the posterior pituitary. Let me go over it again. So the hypothalamus, it produces all these hormones. Now remember I told you the hypothalamus, when it produces its hormones, okay, the hormones go straight to the pituitary. So that means that when it produces, for example, thyrotropin releasing hormone, there should be a special cell on the pituitary, because the TRH will not go and stimulate the entire pituitary gland. So there is a special cell in the pituitary, we call it the thyrotroph cells. So when TRH is being produced, it goes straight to the pituitary gland, specifically the thyrotroph cells. Then it stimulates the thyrotroph cells to produce TSH. Then we have the corticotropin releasing hormone. The corticotropin releasing hormone, when it is produced by the hypothalamus, it goes to the pituitary. But which cell in the pituitary does it target? The corticotroph cells. When it targets the corticotroph cells, it will stimulate it to produce what? ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone. Now, the hypothalamus also produces the gonadotropin releasing hormone. The gonadotropin releasing hormone, it goes to the pituitary. What cell in the pituitary does it target? The gonadotroph cells. When it targets the gonadotroph cells, it will stimulate the gonadotroph cells to produce two different hormones, the FSH and LH. That's the follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Then we have the growth hormone releasing hormone. That one too is produced by the hypothalamus. It will target the pituitary, but specifically what cells? Somatotroph. What will it do to the somatotroph? It will stimulate it to produce growth hormone. Now, hypothalamus also produces growth hormone inhibiting hormone. What does it do? It goes to the pituitary. What cell does it target? The same somatotroph cells. What will it do to these cells? It will stimulate it to produce inhibiting hormones for growth hormone inhibiting hormones. Then we have prolactin inhibiting hormone. What does it do? It also targets pituitary. What does it target? It targets a cell in pituitary called the latotroph cells. What does it do to the latotroph cells? It will stimulate the latotroph cells and inhibit prolactin secretion. Then we have the melanocyte stimulating hormone. What does it do? It targets the pituitary. What cell in the pituitary? The melanotroph cells. What will it do to the melanotroph cells? It will stimulate the melanotroph cells to inhibit melanocyte stimulating hormone production. Now, the last hormone is ADH and oxytocin. Remember, with ADH and oxytocin, even though they are produced in the hypothalamus, they are not stored in the hypothalamus. They are sent to posterior pituitary to be stored there, and they are released from the posterior pituitary. All right. So let's do a simple quiz exercise. When the hypothalamus produces the prolactin inhibiting hormone, what gland does it target?
Latotrophs.
When the hypothalamus produces the prolactin inhibiting hormone, what gland does it target?
Sir, please come again.
When hypothalamus produces prolactin inhibiting hormone, what gland does it target?
The pituitary gland.
The pituitary gland. Those who are saying the pituitary gland. And this is a simple question. When the hypothalamus produces prolactin inhibiting hormone, what gland does it target? It's the pituitary gland. What cell in the pituitary gland does it target?
That's the latotrophs.
This is when you say latotrophs. And in anatomy, understanding the question is very important. So in science, understanding question is very, very important. So when hypothalamus produces prolactin inhibiting hormone, what gland does it target? It's pituitary gland. And remember, all the troughs that you are seeing, they are cells. They are not glands. They are cells. So if I ask you, okay, if hypothalamus produces corticotropin releasing hormone, what gland does it target?
The corticotrophy.
Hey,
The pituitary gland.
and Fosti, pituitary gland. Understanding question is important too. Corticotrophs, they are not cells. They are not glands. They are cells. So if we ask you what glands does it target, it's the pituitary gland. Okay. If hypothalamus produces the gonadotropin releasing hormone, what gland does it target?
The pituitary gland.
Pituitary gland. But when we ask you what cell in the pituitary gland does it target, that is when you say gonadotroph cells. Is that okay? All right. So if the hypothalamus produces the melanocyte stimulating hormone inhibiting hormone, what cell in the pituitary gland does it target?
The melanotrophs.
Good. Then now you can now see the melanotroph cells. Okay. All right. The hypothalamus produces the thyrotropin releasing hormones. Which cell in the pituitary gland does it target?
The thyroid.
Thyrotroph cells. Okay. The hypothalamus produces prolactin inhibiting hormone. Which gland does it target? What's the target gland for prolactin inhibiting hormone?
Pituitary gland.
Pituitary
The
gland.
pituitary
Yes.
gland.
Pituitary gland. Okay. What is the target cell for gonadotropin releasing hormone?
The gonadotroph cell.
Gonadotroph.
Gonadotroph cell. So in an MCQ, you see the pituitary gland will be resting comfortably at option C, waiting for those who do to go and circle it and get the answer wrong. Because once we are talking about cell, you can't go and circle the gland.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is the target cell for growth hormone inhibiting hormone?
Somatotroph cells.
So, somatotroph cells. Okay, what is the target cell for corticotropin releasing hormone?
Corticotroph cell.
Corticotroph cells. Okay.
Corticotroph.
What is the target cell for melanocyte stimulating hormone inhibiting hormone?
Melanotroph cells.
Okay. Another way we can ask this question is, thyrotrophs are target cells for which hormone? Thyrotrophs, they are target cells for which hormones?
The
Thyrotropin
Releasing hormone.
Ask the question. So you see the question there. So thyrotrophs are target cells for which hormone? Then you see A, corticotropin releasing hormone. B, growth hormone releasing hormone. C, thyrotropin releasing hormone. Okay. Lactotrophs in the pituitary gland are target cells for which hormone? What would be your answer?
Prolactin inhibiting hormone.
Good. Prolactin inhibiting hormone or dopamine. Okay. Gonadotrophs in the pituitary gland are target cells for which hormone?
Gonadotropin
Releasing
hormone.
Good. Excellent. Gonadotropin releasing hormone. This shows that you are concentrating. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so this is how we can ask questions, and usually you should expect about 5 MCQs from this table. So, and the questions will be direct. That one is direct, just the way I'm asking is straight. So, thyrotrophs in the pituitary are target cell for which hormone? Then you see the answer there. You see thyrotropin releasing hormone there. You see corticotropin releasing hormone. You see gonadotropin. Then you know the answer is thyrotropin. You circle straight. Then another thing we can ask you is that, okay, somatotrophs in the pituitary gland are target cells for which hormone? You see growth hormone inhibiting hormone will be there. Prolactin inhibiting hormone will be there. Okay. You see corticotropin releasing hormone, then you circle the correct answer. Is that okay? Okay. Which hormone is produced in the hypothalamus but stored in the posterior pituitary?
And oxytocin.
Oxytocin.
And oxytocin. Antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. Okay, and another way we can ask you, so this table can help you to know the hormones produced by the hypothalamus. At the same time, this table will also teach you hormones produced by the pituitary gland. So you see the pituitary gland, the right side, the pituitary gland produces the thyroid stimulating hormone, the adrenocorticotropic hormone, the follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, the growth hormone, the growth hormone inhibiting hormones, the prolactin secretion, the prolactin, the melanocyte stimulating hormones, and then so all this. So from here up is the anterior pituitary. So if you are looking at hormones produced by the anterior pituitary, we have the TSH, ACTH, FSH, LH, GH, the inhibitors for growth hormone, prolactin releasing hormone secretion, inhibitors for prolactin releasing hormone, and then inhibitors for melanocyte stimulating hormone. Okay, then the posterior pituitary releases the antidiuretic hormone and then the oxytocin. Okay, good. So pay attention to the question. So this table will teach you a lot of things. So it will let you know the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland at the same time. Okay, so the hypothalamus hormones are the thyrotropin releasing hormone. Okay, so thyrotropin releasing hormone, which gland does it target?
The pituitary gland.
Good, the pituitary gland. So those are tricks that we can. Okay, thyrotropin releasing hormone, which cell does it target?
Thyroid cell.
The thyroid. So you see, there are two different things. So if we ask you the gland, that is when you say the pituitary gland. But when we ask you the cell, you can't go and say the pituitary gland. That one you say the thyroid cells in the pituitary gland. Okay. Prolactin inhibiting hormone, which gland does it target?
The pituitary gland.
The pituitary gland. Which cell does it target?
The lactotroph.
The lactotroph cells in the pituitary gland. Okay. Gonadotropin releasing hormone. Which cell does it target?
Gonadotroph.
The gonadotroph cells. The gonadotroph cells. Okay, the gonadotroph cells. Okay, mention 3 hormones produced by the anterior pituitary. From this table, mention 3 hormones produced by the anterior pituitary.
The thyrotropin releasing hormone.
Hey, Adam, don't continue. Hormones produced by the anterior pituitary, and we are talking about releasing hormones.
The stimulating hormone.
Good, you are now talking. I gave you a trick that anytime you hear releasing hormones, we are talking about the hypothalamus. Okay, so go ahead. So the thyroid stimulating hormones.
Follicle stimulating hormone.
The follicle stimulating hormones.
Growth hormone.
Growth hormone, yes.
Adrenocorticotropic hormone.
Adrenocorticotropic hormone. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the prolactin.
The prolactin, inhibiting hormones for prolactin, and then inhibiting hormones for growth hormones, and then inhibiting hormones for melanocyte stimulating hormones. Okay, good. So if we ask you,
please, I want to ask a question.
Okay, ask your question, Stella.
So, aside the antidiuretic hormone and the oxytocin that is being stored in the posterior pituitary, the remaining ones, are they targeted by the anterior part of the pituitary or?
Oh, so all the hormones, so all these hormones, so the thyrotropin releasing hormone, corticotropic releasing hormone, all these hormones target the anterior part of the pituitary. So the posterior pituitary, the only hormones that goes there, they are not target, they just go there to be stored there in the posterior pituitary. So we don't have any target cells in the posterior. It's just a storage gland. So the posterior pituitary is a storage gland. So these thyrotroph cells, the corticotroph cells, the gonadotroph cells, the somatotroph cells, the lactotroph cells, the melanotroph cells, all these cells are on the anterior pituitary. Is that okay? So the posterior pituitary, the posterior pituitary is just a storage gland. It's for storage. It only stores 2 hormones, the antidiuretic hormone and the oxytocin. Okay, so all these cells that we are talking, so all the hormones produced by the hypothalamus, with the exception of ADH and oxytocin, all of them go straight to the anterior pituitary. They target the anterior pituitary. Why? Because it's only the anterior pituitary that has cells for those hormones. Okay, so the thyroid. So that means that, you see, if hypothalamus release the TRH, it will not go and influence the corticotroph cells. It's only the thyroid cells that have receptors for it. Okay, Good. That's the beauty of the endocrine system.
Okay, say.
Yes, please.
Please. So does that mean that the pituitary hormones,
Mm-hmm.
some are not stored at the posterior pituitary, only the
Oh, yeah.
anterior?
This is very interesting. The first time in your class, someone is asking. Let me qualify. Is the question itself is incorrect? The question is incorrect. So it's simple. The posterior pituitary, it doesn't
I'm
produce.
confused.
The posterior pituitary, what we are saying is that it doesn't produce. It's only a storage gland. The hormone inside the posterior pituitary, they are being produced in the hypothalamus, then it comes down to be stored in the posterior pituitary. You shouldn't be confused. There are two hormones in the posterior pituitary. They are not produced there. They are produced in the hypothalamus. Then they are sent down to the posterior pituitary to be stored there. Have you gotten it now?
I'm still confused.
Where are you confused?
You see, you said under the target cells in the pituitary gland, you said the antidiuretic hormone and then the oxytocin are being stored in the posterior pituitary. The posterior pituitary.
Okay.
And
so then it means that you are finding it difficult to, you are not confused. You are finding it difficult to articulate the statement there. We are trying to tell you that there is no target cell for ADH and oxytocin. There is no target cell for it in the pituitary. Those hormones are produced in the hypothalamus. Then they are sent to be stored there. So the ADH and oxytocin, they don't have targets on the posterior pituitary. We store them there.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Have you gotten it now? It's something simple to articulate.
Yes.
You shouldn't struggle. So that is the reason why in this part of the table, we've written it is stored in the posterior to tell you that the cells, there is no target cells on the posterior pituitary for these hormones, the oxytocin and antidiuretic. We just store them inside the posterior pituitary, unlike the other hormones. So these ones, so for example, thyrotropin releasing hormone, it is not stored in the anterior pituitary. It has a target cell there. Is that okay? So the anterior pituitary does not store the thyrotropin releasing hormone. It has a target cell for it, meaning the TRH can cause it to work. But when it comes to ADH and oxytocin, it doesn't have a target cell on the posterior pituitary. It is sent there to be stored. Have you gotten it? Yeah, so that's why we don't have any target cell here. That's why we've written it is stored there in the posterior pituitary. Is that so? When the hypothalamus produces ADH and oxytocin, it will send it to the posterior pituitary to be stored and released later when they are needed. Is that okay? So it's not like it will produce ADH, then it will go and influence a cell on it. So posterior pituitary is not having a target cell for oxytocin and ADH. It is produced in the hypothalamus, then we send it there for them to be stored. Okay, but when it comes to TRH, when it is being produced in the hypothalamus, it goes straight to the anterior pituitary. It has a target on it. So it will also go and influence the anterior pituitary to produce its hormone. So the anterior pituitary produces the TSH. But before this TSH will be produced, the hypothalamus have to produce the TRH. Then the TRH will stimulate the thyrotrophs on the anterior pituitary. Then the thyrotrophs will now produce the TSH. When it comes to CRH, the hypothalamus will produce the CRH. The CRH will go and influence the corticotrophs on the anterior pituitary. Then the anterior pituitary will now produce ACTH. Gonadotropin releasing hormone, when it is being produced by the hypothalamus, it goes straight to the anterior pituitary. When it will go and look for gonadotrophs and stimulate these gonadotrophs to produce the FSH and LH. That's how it works. But when it comes to the posterior pituitary, when it is being produced, it is not going to influence the posterior to do anything on. It is going there to be stored. Simple as that. Okay, all right, that is fine. That is fine. So find a way to articulate, and that is why I was telling you this table is very good, because the table will let you learn the hormones produced by the pituitary gland and the hormones produced by the hypothalamus at a glance. Okay, so here this side is showing you the hormones produced by the pituitary gland. So we have the TSH, we have the ACTH, we have the follicle stimulating hormone, we have the luteinizing hormone, we have the growth hormone, we have the growth hormone inhibiting, we have the inhibitors for growth hormone secretion, inhibitors for prolactin secretion, inhibitors for melanocyte stimulating hormones. Okay, and when we come to the posterior pituitary, we have the posterior pituitary hormone. So we have the ADH and oxytocin. And I mentioned that ADH and oxytocin, even though they are released from the posterior pituitary, they are not produced over here. Okay, that is fine. That is fine. Okay, let's try and look at these diagrams. So you see, we have all the releasing hormones are produced by what? The hypothalamus. So corticotropin releasing hormone, thyrotropin releasing hormone, gonadotropin releasing hormone, growth hormone releasing hormone. You see, so you see all the releasing hormones and inhibiting hormones are produced by the hypothalamus. And these are the hormones produced by the anterior pituitary. So you see what I was talking about. These are the hormones produced by the anterior pituitary. Okay, so the anterior pituitary hormones, we have the adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH, thyroid stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, growth hormone, and then prolactin. Okay, good. So these are the hormones produced by the anterior pituitary gland. Okay, so all these hormones too are the hormones produced by the hypothalamus. These are the hormones produced by the hypothalamus. So gonadotropin releasing hormone, thyrotropin release. Anytime you see that all the tropin hormones are from the hypothalamus. So gonadotropin releasing hormone, thyrotropin releasing hormone, corticotropin. Anytime you see tropin, all the tropin hormones, they are coming from the hypothalamus. That's also one trick, because sometimes we can mention the hormone, then we tell you to mention the gland that produces it. So anytime you see tropin, it's coming from the hypothalamus. So gonadotropin, hypothalamus, thyrotropin, hypothalamus, corticotropin, hypothalamus. Okay, and all the inhibiting and releasing hormones are also from the hypothalamus. But mostly the stimulating hormones are from the anterior pituitary. So if you hear a hormone like follicle stimulating hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone, it's coming from the anterior pituitary. Okay. What are the hormones? What are the hormones released from the posterior pituitary?
Antidiuretic hormone and
Oxytocin.
Okay. What are the two hormones produced by the hypothalamus but stored in the posterior pituitary?
Antidiuretic hormone
hormone
and
oxytocin.
Hormone. What is another name for posterior pituitary?
It's neurohypophysis.
Neurohypophysis. Why do we call it neurohypophysis?
Because it connects the
Connect to the
hypothalamus by nerves.
It
Nerve
connects
fiber.
It connects to
the hypothalamus
by
connects the posterior pituitary gland through nerves fibers.
That is excellent. That is excellent. Okay, so it connects to the posterior pituitary with the help of nerve fiber. Okay, what is another name for anterior pituitary? What is another name for anterior pituitary? Come again?
Adenohypophysis.
Why do we call it adenohypophysis?
Because it connects to blood vessel.
Hypothalamus. Blood
because
vessels.
the anterior pituitary connects to the hypothalamus by blood vessels.
Vessel.
Is that okay? Okay. Mention the hormones produced by the hypothalamus. What are the hormones produced by the hypothalamus? Mention all the hormones produced by the hypothalamus.
The tyrotropin
releasing hormone. Corticotropin releasing hormone.
The growth inhibiting
releasing hormone.
Gonadotropin releasing hormone.
Okay.
Growth hormone inhibiting hormone. Prolactin inhibiting hormone.
Okay.
Melanocyte stimulating hormone.
Excellent. That is excellent. What is the target gland for TRH?
Pituitary gland.
One is still saying thyrotrophs.
Pituitary gland.
Pituitary gland. When you say gland, don't say the thyrotrophs. Thyrotrophs are not glands, they are cells.
Yes.
So when we say target gland, don't go and circle the thyrotrophs. You'll be marked wrong. So when we ask you what is the target gland for TRH, it's simple, pituitary gland. What's the target gland for GHRH? Growth hormone releasing hormone.
Pituitary gland.
Good, simple as that. In the options, the wrong answer you can anticipate will be there. So if I ask you what is the target gland for growth hormone releasing hormone, pituitary gland will be there. Somatotrophs too will be there for you to choose and get it wrong. I'll bring all of them there. The possible wrong answer you are likely to think of too will be there. Okay, good. All right. So what is the target cell for MSH?
Melanotrophs.
Melanotrophs. Okay. What is the target cell for oxytocin in posterior pituitary?
Target cell.
That answer shows that you've now understood. Yes. So that's the best answer. Yes. And it's a good question for me to set. So there is no target cell for oxytocin and ADH in the pituitary. They are just stored there. Is that okay? They are just stored there. There are no target cells for oxytocin. The target cell for oxytocin, they are inside your uterus. We have some of them in your uterus, and we have some of them in your breast tissues. Okay, great. And we will come to that later on. Okay. What is the target cell for CRH? Come again.
Corticotrophs.
Corticotroph cells. Okay, what cell in the pituitary gland produces follicle stimulating hormone? You see how it goes. So the cells there. So for example, if tyrotropin releasing hormone is produced, it will go and wake the tyrotroph cells up and tell them that start producing TSH. That's how it works. So anytime the hypothalamus produces the CRH, then it will go and wake the corticotroph cells in the anterior pituitary gland that wake up and start producing ACTH. So if we ask you, okay, what cell in the anterior pituitary produces thyroid stimulating hormone? The tyrotroph cells. Okay. What cells in the anterior pituitary produces inhibitors for melanocyte stimulating hormone?
The melanotrophs.
Good. The melanotrophs cells. Okay, that is excellent. So basically, this is it about the hypothalamus. Okay, so the hypothalamus is a very interesting gland. Okay, what are the two communicating systems or transport systems in the hypothalamus? Yes, what are the two transport systems in the hypothalamus?
Hypophyseal portal system.
Oh, I didn't hear. Come again.
Hypophyseal portal system and
Hypothalamus,
hypophyseal tract.
Hypophyseal portal system. Hey, you guys are shocked. The hypophyseal portal system and then the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract. So if someone tell you, oh, what is hypothalamus in the endocrine, then you tell the person, oh, hypothalamus is the master gland or the chief gland in the endocrine system. That is the boss. It only communicates to the anterior pituitary, and the anterior pituitary is the master gland. The anterior pituitary has two parts. The anterior part, which we call the anterior pituitary, and the posterior part, which we call the posterior pituitary. The posterior part is connected to the hypothalamus by nerve fibers. Because of that, we also call it neurohypophysis. The posterior pituitary is connected to the hypothalamus by blood vessels. Because of that, we also call it adenohypophysis. Now, the hypothalamus produces the releasing hormones and inhibiting hormone. And it also produces two hormones which are not stored in the hypothalamus and released there, but they are rather sent to the posterior pituitary to be stored and released there. So remember, ADH and oxytocin, they are produced and sent to the posterior pituitary to be stored there. So that means that they are stored in the posterior pituitary, and because they are stored there, they are released there. So if we ask you where is oxytocin being released from, it's being released from the posterior pituitary, and it's also being stored in the posterior pituitary, but it is being produced in the hypothalamus. Keep it in your mind. Okay. And all the hormones produced by the hypothalamus, their target cells are on the pituitary gland, specifically the anterior pituitary. So thyrotropin releasing hormone, the target cell is the thyrotroph cells on the pituitary gland. Corticotropin releasing hormone, the target cell is the corticotroph cells. The gonadotropin releasing hormone, the target cell is the gonadotroph cells. The growth hormone releasing hormone, the target cell is the somatotroph cells. All these cells are on the anterior pituitary. Is that okay? That is how interesting it is. Okay, so good. So basically, that is it for the hypothalamus. So you see, hypothalamus is very interesting. That's the boss. Okay, in fact, that is where all the command is coming from. But it is very small. And a hypothalamus is a typical example of what we call, don't mind the size. Very small, but it's doing mighty things. Okay, it's a very, very small in size. If you look at the hypothalamus in the brain, very, very, very small in size. Okay, but it does a lot of mighty things. Okay, great. That is fine. The pituitary gland do the same thing. It's also a bit smaller in size, but it does a lot of mighty things. Good. So I think for today, we are going to end with the pituitary gland for today. We will end with the pituitary gland. So the pituitary gland, like I mentioned, is also called the master gland. Which gland is the master regulator?
Hypothalamus.
The hypothalamus. And the master gland is the pituitary. Look at another name for the pituitary. We also call it the hypophysis gland. Say it. Say hypophysis gland. Say hypophysis. Say it again. Say hypophysis gland.
Hypophysis gland.
That's another name for the pituitary gland. We also call it the hypophysis gland or the hypophysis. Is that okay? The hypophysis gland. Okay, that's another name for the pituitary gland. Or you can also call it the master gland. Is that okay? The master gland. Okay. And the hypothalamus controls all that's why we call it the master gland though. So you see sometimes it's like if you think of a company, a company, you can have the owner, but the owner also have a manager. So it's the manager that controls all the workers, but not the owner. The owner only controls the manager. So the owner has got no business with you as a worker. The owner only works with the manager. That's how the endocrine system works. So for example, the hypothalamus, it has got no business with the thyroid gland though. The hypothalamus only communicates with the pituitary gland. And the pituitary gland, on the other hand, communicates with all the other glands. That's why the pituitary gland, we call it the master gland. And the hypothalamus is the master regulator. That's the boss. It's like the owner. So for the hypothalamus, it has got nothing to do with the other. It only deals with the pituitary. And the pituitary is the one that deals with it controls all the other endocrine glands in the body. Very interesting. Okay, so the pituitary gland controls the activities of many other endocrine glands in the body. It's about 1.3 centimeters in diameter. Okay, but when you are pregnant, it enlarges by up to 50% during pregnancy. And I mentioned that it's located at the base of the brain. Okay, in a bony cavity called the sella tessica of the sphenoid bone. It is housed in a bony cavity. Please pay attention. This is a serious anatomical word where the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, is located. It's examinable in anatomy. So it is located at the base of the brain, specifically in a bony cavity called the sella tessica of the sphenoid bone. Say it after me. Say sella tessica. Say sella
Tessica. Sella.
of the sphenoid bone. Sella tessica of the sphenoid bone. This is where the pituitary gland is located. Okay, so if we ask you the location of the pituitary gland, then you say that, okay, the pituitary gland is located in a bony cavity called the sella tessica within the sphenoid bone. Okay, that is where the pituitary gland is located anatomically. It's located in a bony cavity called the sella tessica of the sphenoid bone. And you see, I told you that it is suspended from the hypothalamus by a stalk known as the infundibulum. Let's go back. You remember I showed you the infundibulum. You see, it is suspended. It is suspended from the hypothalamus by a stalk known as the infundibulum. Say infundibulum.
Infundibulum.
So if we ask you, what structure suspends the pituitary gland to the hypothalamus? That's the infundibulum.
Infundibulum.
Okay, infundibulum. Okay, yes. So it's also a very important anatomical word that you have to know. Okay, so it is suspended from the hypothalamus by a stalk. So we can ask you in exams that the pituitary gland is suspended from the hypothalamus by a stalk-like structure known as. Your answer is the infundibulum. Simple as that. Okay, good. And I told you the gland. What are the two parts of the pituitary gland? The pituitary gland is divided into two. What are they?
The anterior and the posterior.
Good. So the anterior pituitary, which we call the adenohypophysis, and the posterior pituitary, which we also call the neurohypophysis. What are the two hormones stored and released from the posterior pituitary?
The
oxytocin and ADH.
Good. ADH and oxytocin. ADH and oxytocin. Okay. And what are the hormones that are produced from the hormones that are produced from the anterior pituitary? What are the hormones? So we have the FSH, the LH, the thyroid stimulating hormone, the adrenocorticotropic hormone, the growth hormone, prolactin releasing hormone. That's the anterior part. So the anterior hormones are this: the FSH, LH, TSH, ACTH, GH, and PRL. And then the posterior hormones are two. But remember, the posterior hormones are not produced in the posterior pituitary. They are only stored and released from there. Is that okay? Great. Great. Now, we have something we call the hypothalamic axis. It's very interesting, and they are very interesting anatomical features. But I think I'll explain the hypothalamus axis in class tomorrow because it's practical. Okay, so I would like to demonstrate it to you in class tomorrow so that it makes it very simple for you. So we have what we call the hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis. We have the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Okay, and then we also have, so we have about three different axes. So we have the hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis, hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, and hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Okay, and these are more like communicating pathways. So you know the communicating pathways for hypothalamus, they are two: the hypophyseal portal system and the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract. Okay, but when it comes to the pituitary, the communicating system, we call them axes, because you see, the pituitary gland does not work on its own. It works under the influence of hypothalamus. So the communicating system is from the hypothalamus, pituitary to the other gland. So from the hypothalamus, the pituitary to the other gland. And we call that an axis. Okay, good. So the hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis. All that means is that, let me use this diagram. All that means is that you see, the hypothalamus produces the thyrotropin releasing hormone. The thyrotropin releasing hormone targets the pituitary, right? When it targets the pituitary, which cell in the pituitary does TRH target? Which cell in pituitary does TRH target? Which cell in the pituitary does TRH target?
The thyroid cell.
The thyroid cells. So TRH is produced in the hypothalamus. It goes to the thyroid cells. I'll explain the axis. Then I'll let some of you summarize it, practice it. Then I think we can end here for today. So TRH produced there. I'll go over it like 3 times. So TRH, the hypothalamus produces TRH. The TRH goes to the pituitary, and it will stimulate thyroid cells to produce thyroid stimulating hormone. Now, the thyroid stimulating hormone goes to the thyroid gland. Then it will stimulate thyroid gland to produce T4, T3. Okay. Now, when T4 and T3 becomes more, they send a negative signal, 1, to the hypothalamus, so that the hypothalamus stop producing the TRH. And they also send a negative signal to the pituitary, so that the pituitary also stop producing TSH. That's the first one. Let me go over it for the second time. Now, the hypothalamus produces TRH. When it produces the TRH, it goes to the pituitary gland and stimulates the pituitary gland to produce TSH. That's the thyroid stimulating hormone. Thyroid stimulating hormone also targets the thyroid gland. It stimulates the thyroid gland to produce the thyroid hormones, that's T3 and T4. When T3 and T4 becomes more, they send a negative signal, 1, to the pituitary itself, and 2, to the hypothalamus, so that the hypothalamus reduce the production of TRH. And also the pituitary will also reduce the production of what? Of the TSH. The third time, the hypothalamus produces the TRH. When it produces the TRH goes to the pituitary and stimulates the pituitary to produce the TSH. The TSH also targets the thyroid gland, stimulates the thyroid gland to produce the thyroid hormones, which is the T3 and T4. Now, when T3 and T4 become more in the blood, they send a negative signal, 1, to the pituitary and 2, to the hypothalamus. At the hypothalamus, it will tell the hypothalamus, stop producing the TRH. Why? Because the T3, T4, they are more. And to the pituitary, to tell the pituitary, stop producing TSH. Why? Because the T3 and T4 are more. For the last time, the hypothalamus produces the TRH. The TRH targets the pituitary and stimulates the pituitary to produce what? TSH. TSH goes to the thyroid gland, stimulates the thyroid gland to produce the T3 and T4. Now, once the T3, T4 levels become more in the blood, they send a negative signal, 1, to the pituitary and 2, to the hypothalamus. To the hypothalamus, it will tell it to stop producing the TRH. To the pituitary, it will tell it to stop producing the TSH. Who can summarize the hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis? Yes, who can summarize the axis?
Please let me check.
Okay, try.
Say. Please let me check.
Yes, go ahead. Try. We are listening.
Okay, so the hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis.
Excellent.
The hypothalamus produces the TRH.
Okay, good.
And the pituitary produces the TSH.
No,
So
don't say it that
the
way. Don't say it that way. You started well. So the hypothalamus produces the TRH. Then the TRH will go and stimulate the pituitary to produce the TSH. Then the TSH will go and stimulate the thyroid gland to produce T3 and T4. And when T3 and T4 become more in the blood, they send a negative signal to the pituitary, 1, and 2 to the hypothalamus, so that the hypothalamus reduce the production of TRH. And then the pituitary also reduce the production of TSH. Simple as that. So you can come again, please.
Okay. So the hypothalamus produces the TRH.
Excellent. Good. Excellent.
It's stimulating, or simply, am I wrong?
Go, you land, then we see whether you're on track or you are missing it.
And it sends the pleasing information.
So the hypothalamus produces TRH. It targets the pituitary. Then it stimulates the pituitary to produce TSH. Then TSH also targets thyroid gland. Stimulate thyroid gland to produce T3 and T4. When T3, T4 become more in the blood, they send a negative signal, 1 to the pituitary and 2 to the hypothalamus. What will the negative signal do? The negative signal will tell the hypothalamus to stop producing TRH. And that same negative signal will also tell the pituitary to stop producing TSH. That is it. Yes. Who wants to try?
So I'll try. Say.
Yes, go ahead. Emanuela, go ahead.
Okay. So please, the hypothalamus produces the TRH.
Excellent. Good.
Then the TRH hormone stimulates the pituitary gland to produce the TSH.
Good. Excellent.
Then the TSH also stimulate the thyroid gland to produce the T3 and then the T4.
Excellent. Good.
So when the T3 and the T4 becomes more, it sends signals to two signals to the hypothalamus. Negative signals to the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland.
Excellent. Good.
So it sends negative signal to the hypothalamus to stop producing the TRH. And then also to the pituitary gland to also stop producing the TSH.
Emanuela, go over it one more time. You've gotten it 100%. You'll go over it again.
Okay. So the hypothalamus produces the TRH hormone.
All right.
And then the TRH hormone stimulates the pituitary gland to produce the TSH hormone.
All right.
And then the TSH also stimulates the thyroid gland to produce the T3 and then the T4.
Good. Excellent.
So when the T3 and the T4 becomes small, it sends negative signals to the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. So it tells the hypothalamus to stop producing the TRH and also the pituitary gland to stop producing the TSH hormone. Thank you.
Excellent. Go over it one more time, one last time. Some are still learning.
So
go over it for the last
time. Okay. So the hypothalamus produces the TRH hormone. And then the TRH hormone stimulates the pituitary gland to produce TSH hormone.
Good. Excellent.
And then the thyroid gland, the TSH hormone also stimulates the thyroid gland to produce the T3 and then the T4.
Excellent. Good.
When the T3 and then the T4 become small, it sends negative signals to the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland to stop producing the TRH, and then for the pituitary gland to also stop producing the TSH.
Good. So it's simple as that too. So Emanuela have explained it perfectly. Is that okay? So what that tells you is that you see the pituitary gland, it uses an axis. An axis is like a cycle. When we say an axis in anatomy or physiology, it's like a cycle. Okay, so when the hormone become more, a negative signal have to be sent so that all the pathways producing it will stop producing. So it's like an axis. Is the same thing you use to explain this. We call this one is the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis. So you see, when the hypothalamus produces the gonadotropin releasing hormone. The gonadotropin releasing hormone stimulates the anterior pituitary. Then the anterior pituitary will produce the LH and FSH. Okay. Then the LH and FSH stimulates the testes to produce, at the testes it will stimulate it to produce the testosterone. And at the ovaries, it will stimulate it to produce estrogen and progesterone. When estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone levels become more, it will send a negative signal to the anterior pituitary to stop producing the LH and FSH. And it will also send a negative signal to the hypothalamus to stop producing the gonadotropin releasing hormone. Let me go over it for the last time. Now, this one is the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis. Hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis. So the hypothalamus produces what? The gonadotropin releasing hormone. When the hypothalamus produces the gonadotropin releasing hormone, it goes straight to the anterior pituitary, stimulates the anterior pituitary to produce the LH and FSH. Now, when LH and FSH are produced, it goes to LH and FSH. They go in males, it goes to the testes, stimulates the testes to produce the testosterone. In female, it goes to the ovary, stimulate the ovary to produce estrogen and progesterone. At the female side, when estrogen and progesterone levels become more in the blood, it sends a negative signal, 1, to the anterior pituitary, and 2, to the hypothalamus. At the hypothalamus, it will tell it to stop producing the growth hormone releasing hormone. At the anterior pituitary, it will tell it to stop producing the luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. Okay, so the hypothalamus, for the last time, the hypothalamus produces what? The gonadotropin releasing hormone. The gonadotropin releasing hormone goes straight to the anterior pituitary gland, stimulates the anterior pituitary gland to produce FSH and LH. The FSH and LH targets the testes and the ovaries. At the male side, when it targets the testes, it will let the testes produce testosterone. Testosterone will send a negative signal. When testosterone levels become more, it will send negative signal to the anterior pituitary. And again, another negative signal to the hypothalamus, so that the hypothalamus stops producing growth hormone releasing hormone. And then the pituitary gland also stops producing the luteinizing hormones. Is that okay? This is what we call hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis. And this one, the one Emanuela explained, is the hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis. We even have the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Is that okay? We have the pituitary adrenal axis. So that one, the hypothalamus produces the corticotropin releasing hormone. Okay, the corticotropin releasing hormone targets the anterior pituitary, stimulates the anterior pituitary to produce adrenocorticotropic hormone. When the adrenocorticotropic hormone also stimulates the adrenal gland to produce the adrenal hormones. That's the cortisol, the androgens, the aldosterone. Now, when these hormones become more, they send a negative signal, 1, to the anterior pituitary, 2, to the hypothalamus. To the hypothalamus, it will cause it to stop producing the corticotropin releasing hormone. And to the anterior pituitary, it will cause it to stop producing the adrenocorticotropic hormone. So this is the communicating system in the pituitary gland. Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. Okay. Good. Tomorrow I'll find a way to demonstrate it to you in class. Okay, good. So I think we can end here for today. Yes, we can end here for today. So basically today we've been looking at the major organs of the endocrine system. So with the major organs of the endocrine system, we look at the hypothalamus, which is the master regulator, the pituitary gland, which is the master gland, okay, which we also call the hypophysis gland. We looked at the pineal gland, which we mentioned that is located deep inside the brain. The thyroid gland, which is located at the region of the neck in front of the trachea. The parathyroid gland, the adrenal gland, the pancreas, the ovaries, the testes, and thymus, which is usually in children and disappears not long after birth. Okay. We also look at, so these are the major organs of the endocrine system. And then we look at the other organs of the endocrine system, the hormones they produce and their functions. Then we came down to go deep into the hypothalamus. And we mentioned that the hypothalamus is also the master regulator. Very, very small in size, but very crucial in terms of its roles. And it accounts for 1% of the total brain mass. We also mentioned the transport systems of the hypothalamus. 2 transport systems. The hypophyseal portal system, which has got to do with its relationship with the pituitary gland, anterior part of the pituitary gland, via blood vessels. And then the hypothalamic hypophyseal tract, which has got to do with its relationship with the posterior pituitary by nerve fibers. Then we also discussed the hormones produced by the hypothalamus, the releasing hormones and the inhibiting hormones, as well as the 2 hormones that are produced in the hypothalamus, but they are sent or transported to the posterior pituitary to be stored there, which is the ADH and oxytocin. Okay, we also look at the various parts of the hypothalamus and its relationship with the pituitary gland. So there's the hypothalamus and we have the pituitary gland. And we mentioned that the pituitary gland is hung from the hypothalamus by this structure, the infundibulum. And we even look at the various parts of the pituitary gland, the pars tubularis, the pars intermedia, the pars distalis, which is the downmost part of the anterior pituitary. Then we have the posterior pituitary. The downwards part of the body of the posterior pituitary is the pars nervosa. Okay. We also look at the various hormones produced by the hypothalamus, which we call the hypothalamic hormones. So all the releasing and inhibiting hormones are hypothalamic hormones. And we mentioned that the hormones produced by the hypothalamus, they target the anterior pituitary. So all the hormones produced by the hypothalamus, their target cells are in the anterior pituitary. So TRH targets the thyrotropes, CRH targets the corticotropes, JNRH targets the gonadotropes, growth hormone releasing hormone targets the somatotropes, growth hormone inhibiting hormone also targets the somatotropes. And I mentioned that you have to know all the cells. So if you take each hypothalamic hormone, you should know the cells that they stimulate. But I was very clear that all hormones in the hypothalamus, their target gland is the pituitary gland, specifically the anterior pituitary gland. Is that okay? All the hormones in the hypothalamus, their target gland is the pituitary, specifically the anterior pituitary gland. Okay, with the exception of the ADH and oxytocin. Those ones are produced in the hypothalamus, but they are stored in the posterior pituitary and released from there. Okay, good. Then we came down to also discuss the pituitary gland. Okay, and we look at the various parts of the pituitary gland. I mentioned that the size, the diameter of the pituitary gland is an anatomical feature you have to know. And then the location of the pituitary gland, it comes a lot in anatomical exams. So it is housed in a bony cavity called the sella turcica of the sphenoid bone. Okay, and the 2 divisions of the adenohypophysis. Why do we call the anterior pituitary adenohypophysis? We can ask you in the exams. Okay, why do we call the posterior pituitary neurohypophysis? It's an examinable question. Is that okay? Great. And the hormones produced by the anterior pituitary. So all these hormones are produced by the anterior pituitary: FSH, LH, TSH, ACTH, GH, and prolactin releasing hormone. and then the ADH and